So I write a comment in there. I go, oh, good, good, good. But so I wrote a comment in this thing. I wrote a comment in this thing where some guy goes, well, Pro Tools didn't even make the list, and I go, well, this is from Synthtopia magazine. I'm not sure any users compose in Pro Tools, and I wouldn't expect them to. Find a ranking from a mixing standpoint, or a post-production standpoint, or even sound design, and I'm sure it'll be a completely different list, right? So of course, some guy replies, "Are you trying to say that engineers don't care about synthesizers?" I don't even know what that. What? He goes, "Pro Tools has a decent set of synthesizers, but they don't cover everything. Blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And I go, actually, I'm saying Pro Tools isn't best suited for synthesizers, but is best suited for plenty of other applications. And some guy replies, "I never had any issues with using synthesizers in Pro Tools. I like a couple of them. Wish I could still use them. Don't know how that's relevant." And then some guy goes, "Yeah, I don't get you at all. It's not suited for synths. It just doesn't have synths. But if you have synths, I don't really see any drawback to using with Pro Tools." I respond, "Well, that's great, but clearly based on this poll, you can see that synth users do not prefer it. So obviously it's not best suited for those users." Anyways. Yep. So, hi. Welcome to Next Wednesday.
Hello.
Brr.
Hi, everybody.
You see the top of my head? Why do you see the top of my head? Yeah, I mean, they exist. They're on my face.
Yo, I'm gonna drop out for 1 sec, and then I'll be right back in. I'm gonna switch to my iPad. Boy.
So, how's your week, Dan? Up to anything fun? Anything exciting? That sounds fun. Yeah, I got a puppy. He's asinine cute, and he's sitting over there and sleeping. He snores a lot. It really, really interrupts my mixing. I mean, yeah, it doesn't actually interrupt my mixing. That's bullshit. But yeah, I got a puppy. I've got like 4 records to do right now, and I'm behind on all of them. Sorry, Rob. I have too much to finish the record. Whoops.
Oh.
And then, it's New Year's and all that, back to work, like my actual day job. And then I just found out that in a week I got to go do 2 shows for Black Sabbath.
Damn.
Cool.
Are you doing Black Sabbath?
Yeah, in Omaha, Nebraska, and Chicago.
Awesome.
At the start of their tour, I'll be on that for those 2 dates. And then after that, I got to book my flights to NAMM to go hang out with you, Dan.
Well, that's pretty awesome. What about you, Kenny? What you been doing?
Working mostly and trying to mix one of my band's old things, or remix it rather. It goes well for the one, and then use the same exact settings and tones and everything for the second song.
Yeah.
And it's not so good.
Oh.
That always seems to go, though, right? You get this one mix down, and it's awesome, and it's tons of fun and great, and then you just want to do one of those import session datas over to your next mix and hope it just comes together. And it just never seems to really come together, right?
Yeah, I tried doing that on my first mix, the first album I mixed ever, and it was just didn't happen. It didn't help matters that the guitar tones were different throughout the entire thing, and it was just like, oh. Okay,
yeah,
so
but
that's why it
enough,
sounds different.
Even when the arrangement's the same, sometimes it still just doesn't work. Like, you kind of pull it up, and all of a sudden the kick drum seems super clicky, and like something else seems really distant, and all these weird things. It doesn't always work right.
Yeah. Kind of bizarre.
Yeah, but you have to do it. I mean, it has to all sound like the same record.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of do the import session data as like a starting point, and then you go from there,
Yeah,
and then you kind of
definitely.
tweak to make that song feel right. And
Hmm.
plus it kind of gets you through a lot of the time-consuming stuff, like creating all the busing and all that.
Yeah.
So Dan, what are you doing? What are you doing today?
So, why don't we jump into it? So,
And why do you keep holding the phone up to your ear?
I'm just listening to make sure that the audio is correct in the stream because we haven't because for the first 1 minute I was speaking, nobody in the stream was hearing it.
Really?
Oh,
So I had to fix that, but I fixed it, so we're good. They can hear my pretty voice, or
I'm glad you got that.
yeah, basically. So today we posted some promo. You saw it. If you are in the stream right now, you're hanging out with us, you're checking out Mix Wednesday for the first time, or if you're checking out for the 50th time, whichever one it is, you'll see that we posted something wonderful today.
52nd time.
What's that?
52nd time, right?
50 seconds. 52nd. That's correct. 52nd.
That means
time.
we are at 1 full year of Mix Wednesday this week.
That is correct. We're at 1 full year. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
You guys have enjoyed it.
What's that?
I said I hope you guys have enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Happy Mix Wednesday anniversary.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, happy Mix anniversary.
Mixversary. Yeah.
That's what this is. This is a special Mix Wednesday, everyone. You hear that, Dan? Let's make it special.
Make it special. Anyways,
So cool. So what are you doing this week?
so essentially, this week, or I should say last week, Ryan, you mixed something, and you spent about 2 hours mixing it. Is that correct?
This is true.
Right.
Tours.
So, in the spirit of Mix Wednesday, we figured why not take advantage of this wonderful thing that happened, Ryan mixing something. This is typically what happens. We mix something, we're like, hey, we can use this for our mix. Why not? And then we're going to talk about it, nerd out about it, and take way too long to get into the subject. But that's okay. Because
Not
we
this
want
time,
to.
guys.
What's that? What'd you say, Ryan? Kenny?
I said not this time.
Not this time. But yeah, we wanted to kind of talk about the first 2 hours of your mix. How do you spend the first 2 hours of your mix? And it's a conversation that we've had kind of lightly, but we've talked about it in a light, more of like a speed mixing. You know, like how do you get something mixed quickly and effectively in a small amount of time, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Nothing, but we haven't really talked about like the actual 2 hour mark, because the 2 hour mark I feel like is a solid amount of time. Like you can actually take a break after like 50 minutes, you know, and then come back to it and spend like the other like hour touching stuff up. You know what I mean? Those first 2 hours of your mix, even though it doesn't feel like a lot of time, maybe to guys who are starting out, especially if you're working in like a station you're unfamiliar with, like, you know, maybe you're going into a room that you don't have that much experience on, that can seem like a pretty daunting task. But for me, for Ryan, for Kenny, we have our own systems, we have our own workflows, and we have all the stuff. So this stuff kind of comes naturally to us, especially for me. Like in the past year, I've started to adopt these workflows that we've been doing here in Mix Wednesday, and they've actually really helped my speed, because it's just workflow, process, workflow, process. Does it sound good? Does it sound bad? Is it where I want it to be? Is it not where I want to be? And you know what? After 2 hours, I actually feel like I'm somewhere. You know what I mean? And I think some people have a problem where they're like, I don't know where I am after 2 hours. They like mix themselves into a hole. You know what I mean? So I think the conversation is a pretty good conversation to have about where are you after 2 hours? What do you do in those 2 hours? You know? And since Ryan, he made a video, we can post it in the chat. You guys can, in the chat or on our Facebook group, you can go and check it out. It's just him mixing. It's just fly on the wall, him mixing. Nothing, there's really no commentary, nothing like that. He just kind of like, just turned on the camera and went. And it's actually pretty cool to watch him kind of just go through it and really watch his approach. And yeah, and we can get into that a little bit, which is what I wanted to do today. But yeah, so how do you spend the first 2 hours of your mix? That's kind of the big question here. So I already kind of know Ryan's story, but I'd love to kind of get Kenny, your opinion on this, or kind of understand what you do in your first 2 hours of your mix. Because I kind of know what I do. Maybe I can talk a little bit what I do. But Kenny, I want to, you're just as experienced mixer. I feel like you actually have been mixing less time than me, which is awesome because your mixes sound rad. And what do you kind of do? What's your process in those first 2 hours? Like, don't think of it like, this is my kick drum, this is my snare, this is my guitar, this is my bass. But, like, what is the mentality behind it? Like, what is your focus? Do you get things done in 2 hours, or is it like, it's just like you're warming up to the song?
Well, hold on. Before you answer that question, there's the question of what do you do before you even start mixing? Is there any, like, process before you start? Kenny?
Oh, you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I wish I was cool and I smoked weed, because I'd say smoke a ton of weed. But
What?
no. Honestly, the more I go along, the more it's like the first even hour, maybe even 2 hours. Well, maybe not that long, but I am doing more mixing. I mean, more listening than mixing. I am doing some stuff, but if the tones are already all there, the tones that I want, I'm doing a lot more listening, and then when I have things further along, that's when I'm doing a lot more back and forth tweaks between things.
Right.
So yeah, it's more subtle for the first, I guess you could say, half of my mix.
So at what point, I mean, so what do you do before you even start mixing? Is there any process before you start? I mean, I assume you sit and you listen to the reference mix or, like, learn the song,
Yeah,
something like that.
I listen to it, and while I'm listening to it, I'm setting things up. I'm making sure everything's going to be as easy as possible to work with, and then I start routing the way I might mix this record.
Okay. And then, how do you pick your reference mixes?
Well, if I don't get any information from the band on that, I try to pick something that I think sounds awesome and that is similar in style.
So your approach is kind of like, I'm gonna take it upon myself to find some references that, because for me, like, I find that when I'm looking for references, like, I actually, maybe I'm a bad mixing engineer, but I almost always kind of disregard their suggestions for mix first references. I mean, I don't know. I do it because I sometimes when I'm working with a band, they'll say, I want the drums from this, I want the guitars from that, I want the bass from this, I want my vocals to sound like this from this, and I'm kind of like, well, okay, I get it, but, like, this is one track we're talking about.
First of all, reset your audio, but second of all, that's not sometimes when you're working with a band. That is every band ever. Every single one of them asks for exactly that.
And it's my audio pretty good right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. I think I know why
Yeah,
he's doing that, but yeah, it's kind of like,
Sometimes, but beforehand, I mean, as long as I know, like, the type of music that it is, if I've heard it before, but I'm not really listening to it, I'll listen to things that are similar to it, the whole day following up to that starting mix. So driving into work, say it's an R&B track, I'm listening to the R&B station all day in and all day out.
Yeah.
And then so my head's in that space, and then I'll either pick some that I feel would be good to do a back and forth reference on,
Right.
or I'll take it from there. I'll kind of, like, write down some songs that would work if I don't really know the shit that well,
Yeah.
So for me, whenever I get a session from a band, I always ask them pretty much immediately, what are some reference mixes I can use here? What's some stuff that you think sounds awesome that you think this would go pretty well with?
Yeah.
And before I even start mixing the track, I've been listening to the rough mix of it for days. And that's just so I get a feel of the song, like feel of where the parts are, how they move from one section to the next, etc. All those things, just so that the ideas are all kind of there. It's not guessing when it comes to mix time. Instead, you're like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do with this section. But like you said, Kenny, leading up to actually mixing the track, I basically listen to only the mix references that they've given me. If they say, hey, I want this to sound like a Mew record, I'm going to listen to Mew, like my favorite Mew record leading up to it. And then they go, oh, I want this to sound like Elbow. I'm going to listen to an Elbow record that I think is awesome. And I'm just going to listen to it and just kind of get in that headspace so that when I get to mixing it, I've been kind of feeling that emotional delivery and that kind of tone for 1-2 days before I even start jumping into how to make it work in an audio sense.
Yeah, you like pump yourself up. I feel like that's what happens with me in metal. Like the past two records, well, the first one, the one that I'm working on right now, I think you guys heard it a couple mix ago. That one and the one before that I did with Kenny, like I haven't been listening to as much metal recently as I should be when I'm as like a self-proclaimed rocker, but like when I want to kind of get myself pumped about that music again, it's the perfect time when you get a record that's like a metal record. You know what I mean? You sit down, you listen to all your favorite metal records, say, that is why I like this record. That is why I like that sad but true kick and snare sound. That is why I like that Gojira sound. That is why I like that ridiculous sound that Meshuggah gets in every single one of their tracks. That bass sound from that's just like another guitar, you know? It's a way of just like getting yourself in the headspace. So this is a process that you guys do before you even start this mix. Like Ryan, before the 2-hour video that we'll reference later in this Mix Wednesday, you did this leading up to this. So it wasn't like it was like boom, cold, right in. It was almost like you warmed yourself up to actually mentally take on the task of mixing this thing for 2 hours. So it's like you just kind of like you're going for a run. You do a little warm up before you go, so you don't like burn yourself later.
Right. Yeah. You got to kind of get in the headspace, the vibe, and the feel of what this record's supposed to be. So if you take the artist's references and use those as a guideline, then you're generally in a good spot.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean you need to use that as your actual mix reference. Because very often I'll let's say it was Mew and Elbow, because I do believe that's what I used in this track. Okay. Let's say I listen to that for a week, and I go, oh, this is awesome, I'm in this headspace or whatever. Probably not going to be a week, realistically it's going to be like 2 days. And then at that point I go, okay, cool, but I think that this reference sonically might work better for this song and what I want to do with it. So I might put in my own mix reference at that point and actually use that for the song, even though I've been listening to Mew or Elbow or whatever else there might be.
Yeah.
So at that point, I've created a playlist in iTunes that has some of the songs they've asked for and a couple that I think are appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones they've asked for is just so I can get the feel of kind of the emotional delivery and the feel overall. The one I put in is because this is what I think sonically the song should be like.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like...
And then
sorry? I was just saying, do you ever feel like... I always feel like the reason why I tend to sometimes bypass what they're actually... There was a moment and it's gone. Anyways, do you ever... So this is what I feel like when I take their references and I consider their references. I say to myself, all right, I know what they're going for, but I'm going to mix it to this. And I know that if I mix it to this, they're going to be happy with the sound because, it's the best possible I know it's going to be the best possible version of them. So it's like it's almost like the references that they suggest, they're valid and it's great and it's awesome, but it's like, in the end, it's not going to sound exactly like their references. You know what I mean? It's just going to sound like them with a little bit of influence of, kind of your sound. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hard to explain, I guess.
Ultimately, when you get a band going, I want my kick drum to sound like Led Zeppelin. I want my guitars to sound like Gojira. I want my vocals to sound like Celine Dion.
Right.
They don't actually want those three things, but it does give you an idea. Okay, this means the guy likes roomier drums.
Okay.
Cool. This means he likes very mid-range forward guitars.
Right.
This means he likes long verbs on vocals. So you can't actually use those three as a reference because if they've split it up into this sound, and this sound, those don't actually work together.
Right.
If you were to take, the Led Zeppelin drums and Gajira guitars and Celine Dion, you couldn't just put that together in a mix. It doesn't work like that. But you use it as a guideline for the overall tonality. You go, okay, he likes roomy stuff. He likes effective verbs and stuff like that on vocals.
Right.
And then from there, you find a mix reference that you feel is actually, it's not even that it's achievable, but it's, as you said, the best representation of what they want to get out of this song.
Right.
But it also has to be the best representation of what you want to get out of the song.
Exactly.
Because if you're making a mix, that's something you're not stoked on, and it's like their dream is to make it sound like all these silly things. If you're not stoked on making it that, you probably shouldn't be mixing this record.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I don't want people to know what I use for references either, especially if they're like rock or metal bands. You know what I mean? It's like dude,
Yeah, I mean,
you
I
totally.
definitely don't want people to know. I use Taylor Swift as a reference for everything.
Right,
dude.
right, right. Well, like some of the metal records, I'm like, yeah, I totally listened to a Nickelback track while I was listening to those guitars, and I don't want to tell them that because they'll be like,
man.
Nickelback, you make it sound like Nickelback, they suck. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, nah, actually, they're
And
mixed.
then they listen to the record. What is it, Dark Horse or
Dark
something?
Horse.
Sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
After that record, basically everything sounds like shit. Like you can play awesome sounding records, then you hit play on Dark Horse, and then you play anything else, and it sounds like shit.
Yep. Basically. Kenny, where are you
Anyway,
at?
so
Where are you at with this, Kenny?
so-
Do you? Oh, sorry, Ryan. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no. Go ahead. And then I got a question.
No, I can relate on the not wanting people to know the mix reference for sure. I won't even want to tell you guys my reference for a lot of things.
Come on, man. You know I listen to everything.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want I want what I'm doing to be close to my reference, but only so close. Like I want it to use it as a reference. I don't want to be like, this is what I used for a reference, and for you guys to be like, well, this sounds nothing like that. You suck.
Because we do that a lot, apparently.
Well, so
You guys are totally harsh.
here's the other thing is that we use references not because we want it to sound exactly like a reference, but
Right.
because we want to have something to bounce it off against, and that's the truth. I mean, when an artist plays their own song, they play their song in an iTunes playlist next to all their favorite stuff, and their stuff needs to be able to sonically fit in with it and compete with it. You're not necessarily using a reference because you're like, I want it to sound exactly like this, but you want it to be, roughly the same overall tonally, same kind of impact, same kind of feel maybe, and same overall volume level.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about this, Ryan, you and I, a few weeks ago. How I don't always use mixed references to literally reference things against. I have them there to help me trust my own ears with what I'm doing.
Right. Sometimes you
not-
have them there just to kind of clear out your own head, right?
Yeah. And I do that almost just as much as trying to match tones or whatever, maybe even more. I do it.
Right. It's almost like just resetting your ears, right?
Yeah, like I almost think of it more of a perspective mix than a reference mix,
Right. So my question that came up, which is kind of actually based on what you were saying earlier, Dan.
Yeah.
2 hours for a mix. I know that when you're really fresh at this, you can easily spend 5 14-hour days.
Yeah.
Going through a mix, and it just
Dude, I
kind of hits
spent
you
like
hard.
12
Dan,
hours and it sounds like crap. Oh no.
Exactly. But when that kind of thing happens, you're in like a weird place. It's never good.
Yeah.
I've been doing it long enough that for me, 2 hours gets me to the point that I could probably take a night break, go away from it, do something else, come back, do tweaks and automation only, and then print a mix and send it to the bank. So when you were asking about me doing this 2 hour mix, this 2 hour mix wasn't me saying I'm cutting myself off at 2 hours.
Right.
It was more just I was doing a mix,
Yep.
and then at 2 hours I'm like, cool, I'm done here.
Right. the moment of the initial listen of these tracks, not initial listen in the sense of the song and all that. Excuse me. Essentially, the listen of, all right, these are all my raw tracks. What we've always said in Mix Wednesday is, and one of the first things you do, just listen to everything. You first open it up, get a sense of everything that's going on in your session, and then from there begin. You know what I mean? Sometimes I found myself when I was first starting, I just get focused on something, and then I just wouldn't leave it for like hours because I thought that's what all the big boys did. But the idea is actually to learn how to something. It's like a philosophy you can apply to business, you can apply to working, you can apply to mixing, anything. It's how much time do you spend working productively, and how much time do you spend working and wasting time. And the more time you can spend working productively, the less time you spend wasting money, time, your hair on your head, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's incredible that you can do that in 2 hours and be at a happy place and say, all right, cool, this is where my reference is, and this is what I'm doing. That's really something. And listening to the track and listening to the bounce that you sent, it doesn't, I wouldn't say to myself, like, if someone just sent me that, I'd be like, oh, wow, they must spend a day on that. You know what I mean? And for you, I guess a day is 2 hours, which is pretty good for, a day's work.
Well, the truth is, usually for me, a day is 4 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Usually I do, because usually I also take tons of breaks. Basically, every 15 or 20 minutes I take a break, I walk away, I come back. Because in this one I was recording the video, it would have been annoying to have a break every 15 minutes where it's just 15 minutes of just sitting on nothing.
Yeah. Now I'm
So I
going to
actually
show you how to make a pour-over coffee.
Right. Let me show you how to make a coffee. Let me take you to this beautiful coffee spot over here, and then come back. That kind of thing. Like, you can't really do that. So
Yeah. I feel that. Well, that's really awesome, Kenny. So
Let's
you
look
do
at
a
this
lot
mix.
What's that?
I was just gonna say we're gonna look at this mix.
Yeah, we can look at it. Totally.
No, never, dude. Why would we do a thing like that?
I don't think it's a great idea at all. Why should we do that? This is gonna.
You
This is Mix
started
Wednesday.
out this whole thing saying how we never get to the point.
Hey man. Hey man. All right.
I mean,
So I'm gonna,
you go by your word. That's good.
yeah. I'm a man of my word.
So to kind of preface this,
Yeah.
This is a song that I was sent, and I listened to the rough bounce for a day or two, just to get a feel of how the song is, what it feels like, what it sounds like, what the mood is. I tried to listen to all the individual parts in it and get an idea of what's possible with what's in there and what's not possible. Then I listened to the reference tracks that these guys had sent me, and these guys had sent me a song by Mew and a song by Death Cab for Cutie, and I kind of just got in the vibe of those, and then just jumped right into the mix. So what Dan's got here is the full mix session, except I do believe I've got a handful of plugins that he doesn't have, so they're literally missing a couple things. But anytime he plays the 2 mix, which is like the whole thing, it should be pretty close to mine because it's a print that I made.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll play the song. I'll jump around a little bit. The song looks like it's organized. Essentially, the mix and in the actual 2 mix, you can actually see the different sections of the song pretty well, just because that's kind of the way audio files look these days. So I'll jump around a little bit. You guys stop me if you want to say something, but I'll just start playing it now. We'll take a listen, and yeah, here we go.
Well, here's a question, Dan. Do you want to start with playing some of the source stuff without the mix, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can do that.
So maybe mute that 2 mix, mute the 2 tracks I added, the note, the kick note, snare note, and then just bypass all plugins, I guess.
Yeah, I can do that.
So what is that? Control, Option, Command, and just click through each one of them?
Yep.
There you go. So yeah, mute those 2 tracks, the snare note and kick note, and then mute the master, or the bounce.
Got it.
Cool.
Let's take a listen to this. I think that should be everything. I'm gonna take a real quick
Did
listen.
you
Here we go.
kick drum as well? Don't mute that one. That one needs to be live.
Got it. Can you hear that all right? Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
As I sing words and melodies, somewhere in time we can always find that place to call home. I know you're out there somewhere inside or something.
What's up?
Could you turn down the output on that? I do believe that's clipping to everybody else.
Sure. Can do that. Put that down at top.
By the way, guys, it's since we hear it in a different form than you guys do, it's kind of hard for us to tell if things are clipping and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't hear the stream. We hear before it hits the stream.
Yeah. And if it's clipping, I can adjust it on my end.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll continue this. I'll jump to just right about here.
Just back it up a ton,
Yeah. How about
just
this?
to make sure.
Time or something I could never do.
What's that?
I don't know if it's distorting. Everyone else would have to tell me.
Yeah, I think
Because
it's all right. I think it's all right here. I got a reading on it, so should be good.
Okay.
Here we go.
Time or something I could never find. You made me feel so alive beyond what I've been dreaming of. And I know we've made some mistakes. I'm gonna say what them if only just for tonight.
All right, and you gotta back it up, or it's still clipping out.
Oh, I gotcha. You mean it's clipping inside of tools a little bit.
Damn.
Cool. Cool. We'll keep going.
It's probably
Still flipping.
Yeah.
Back it up. What's that?
That might be okay there.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, it's always better to be safe,
Yeah, I gotcha.
so we can always just back it off way too far if we need to.
Yeah, gotcha.
Now let the waves take over me for you to see the endless possibilities for you and me.
Cool. That's kind of the idea of the whole thing. We can stop right there. Are there any other sections? Do you want? Is this kind of like that repeated again?
It's basically that for the most part.
Cool. So what I can do now is I'll just mute all that stuff and let me go
Yeah, you
ahead.
can reactivate a bunch of stuff.
Let's do it.
And if you want, you can hit play on the actual mix.
Boom.
And then obviously pull the level down on that T-bus T-bus mix too.
Cool. You mean just play
And
the
make sure it's not hitting any master bus processing for a second time.
right? Exactly. Yeah, I learned my lesson the last time.
And reset your audio, please.
Okay.
So Kenny, how do you like this this track?
I actually kind of think it's kind of a cool song.
Yeah, it's a neat song, right? But like,
Um,
it's funny because it doesn't seem like it has tons of listen to the rough, right?
mm-hmm.
I mean, at least for me, like when I listen to it, I go, okay, this seems cool, but it's kind of aiming for a feel that it just hasn't achieved yet.
Yeah, I feel like it's like not sure if it wants to be like Lisa Loeb or Our Lady Peace.
Yeah, back to the '90s there.
Oh yeah,
So,
always.
I mean, come on, who doesn't like '90s rock? That's basically the best there is.
Right.
So Dan, do you want to play maybe that same section again from the actual mix, but again, make sure the level's really low on that so we're not clipping anything.
Yep. Got it.
Give it a shot.
Pretty sure everything else is muted correctly. Here we go.
We'll just solo it.
All right.
Had to follow the road, as I sing the words and melodies. Somewhere in time we can always find a place to call home.
Find me.
So how does that feel?
Find me.
Feels way better.
All right,
Yeah.
so
It feels like it's more together for sure.
Yeah.
And there's something you did with the snare that kind of gives it more intimate vibe, which I think the song is asking for.
right. So Dan, you've watched the 2-hour mix video of this, all the everything that I did to get to this end point,
Yep.
and you have the session in front of you,
Yep.
so you can actually see everything that I've done here.
Right.
When
So-
you watch this, like what stood out? What makes this an interesting process? Because obviously, since I just kind of did it, I don't really think through it as a process necessarily. I just see it as this is what I do when I mix. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So from an overarching standpoint, if we were to sit here and we were to talk about like your process and individual things you do, most of it kind of covers the initial Mix Wednesday process of, go through everything, your corrective EQ, corrective compression, your gating, your shaping, maybe some creative EQ, and then grouping, and then subgrouping, master bus processing, and kind of a fake master. So that whole process, not something that's new to me. That's something we've been talking about for a year now. And it blew my mind when we first talking about it because it's like, wow, this is an actual method. But what I was really thought was interesting was, yes, that's the flow, but you have a specific flow about the way you mix that is just really, really smooth. You know what I mean? And I don't really know how to.
I mean, no, I don't. I don't know what you mean. You have to tell me because I just do it.
So it's more like, so for me, I feel like sometimes when I'm mixing and I'm working, I feel somewhat chaotic. I feel somewhat like, it's not that I don't know what I'm doing, it's that I feel like I'm constantly like, I need to go this, I need to do that, I need to do this, I need to do that. But for some reason, just watching your flow and the way you mix, it's really smooth. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're like doing one of those commercials where it's like this is clicking on this, you know what I mean? And clicking on this, like everything is very precise, everything is very smooth, everything is very calculated, it seems. So that's the first thing I noticed out of everything. I can get more detailed, but there's just this smooth kind of workflow that you have that I think probably lends. It's probably why you make the right decisions, kind of the first or second time that you try something, because it's just like, all right, does that sound good? No, yes, pull it down. That's not a big deal. Let's move on. Let's keep it flowing. And you always have this way of looping something, muting, unmuting, muting, unmuting. You know what I mean? Like you're always checking, you're always listening to sections, you're doing, you're mixing, you know what I mean? But it's smooth and it's really, it's got a flow to it, you know what I mean? A flow that I don't have. Kenny, I don't know if you've watched the video or if you've watched Ryan just mix.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you recognize that type of behavior from him? I mean, I feel like, he's smooth in general, but like, but like,
Yeah,
feel
I
like,
mean,
Of course.
but do you know what I mean?
I
Like,
think
there's a smoothness, right?
I do. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot. Most of it's just his experience. I mean, I feel like he's done it a lot longer and has, experienced a lot, more different types of situations, and he can make up his mind a lot and get to the sound that he wants a little quicker because of the experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're all working towards that. We all want to be Ryan John.
Right. So I guess that's an opinion that I have about your overall style of mixing and the general feel of the whole thing. One thing I wanted to know specifically was, did you actually, I don't know if this is, feel free to answer it or not answer it. Did you actually like the recordings that you received when you started mixing this?
I liked some of it.
Okay. All right.
The kick sounds all right. The snare sounds pretty decent. I'm not used to only having 5 tracks for drums.
Right. That was the other interesting part.
Limiting. That's incredibly limiting for me, because it doesn't give me the option to kind of develop the drum sound throughout the song.
Right.
I can't really start small, get bigger, and get back to small when I only have basically the core instruments. I've got kick, snare, tom, and an overhead.
Right.
If I had extra room pairs, I could do things where the song could start more roomy, then get really tight, and then get big and roomy again. I could control the development of the song.
Right.
Having only 5 tracks actually really limited that.
Right. You can see in the stream, guys, that what I have highlighted in the session, that's essentially the entire. Well, okay. The first, the what is it? Those 5 blue colored tracks are the drum stems, and I think you actually created 2 of them, which was the snare note
Kick note and snare note I created, yes.
and the kick note. So essentially, you were supplied a kick drum, a snare drum, tom, floor tom, and overhead. Now, if this was Dan's 2-hour mixing, it would be, holy crap! I'm going to text the drummer and be like, "Why the hell do you have 5 tracks? Is this incorrect?" But I guess I'd be like, "What am I going to do? What is this?" So I guess my question is one, I guess you kind of went into knowing that it was going to be 5 tracks only, but how did you let that limitation, how did you work with that limitation?
Well,
Kind of a trick question, because I think I know the answer.
it is a little bit of a trick question. The thing is, I didn't know that's what I was going to get.
Okay.
I got sent the drums before I got sent the session, right?
Oh, wow.
And I go, oh, fuck.
They sent the drums to you in an attachment in an email. It's that small that it was 20 megabytes.
Well, when they hit me up and asked me to do the record, the record, they sent me just the bounce of the song, and I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that the drums were only just 5 tracks. I just assumed that it was more. Having just that meant that in order to create movement, I needed to do the movement myself, meaning during the mellow parts, I might use a super mellow sample to augment the drum kit. During the aggressive parts, I can use a more aggressive sample or something like that. Otherwise, I don't actually have the ability to. There's nothing in that I can get rid of at any part of the song.
Right.
I can't be like, oh, let's just mute the kick drum for this section. So that limitation was unintentional. I didn't really want it to be there, but it was there. So what I did to turn it into something positive was I added these 2 augmented tracks, the snare note and the kick note. And if I'm not mistaken, by the end, those are actually muted for certain sections and unmuted for other sections, so that pardon me again, I'm sorry, I'm sick. So that during an intro, it may be just the real drums, and then later it's got the notes, quote-unquote, note tracks, and then later it's even different. Actually, yeah, you can see that there's sections where it's muted at the start, and it's not muted later on. That was my way of creating movement in the drum kit.
I see.
But that limitation wasn't so awesome for me. I wasn't stoked on it.
Right, but you can tell. But without, ask yourself this, guys. If we didn't address that there were 5 drums in the session, would you have questioned it? Kenny, would you have questioned it?
Would I have questioned what?
Well, when you listen to the track, we listened to that mix. Did you
5 tracks.
hear 5 drum tracks? Did you hear drum tracks?
When I listened to the print,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, no, it sounded great.
Right. It just sounds like
I'm
a
not
drum
sure
mix.
what you're asking here.
essentially what I was.
Well, basically the idea is that there's no question that it's a limited palette you're given. It's not like, oh, it's just one kick mic, one snare mic, one tom, and an overhead. Realistically, for 90% of the song, it's only 3 of those mics are on.
Right.
That's actually what creates the drum kick, snare, and overhead. The toms are only played for like a tiny, tiny bit, right?
Yep.
So when you listen to it in context, though, fortunately, it doesn't sound like it's just 3 mics on a drum kit that are very limited. It sounds like it's actually like just a drum kit that fits in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, I try not to listen to it on those terms. I mean, I think a lot of times, sometimes depending on what you're doing, a drum kit with 3 microphones can sound way better than one with mics on tops and bottoms of every tom and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, it depends on the material.
Right.
But no, I think it fits well.
That's cool. So, Ryan, did you learn anything from like mixing with one single overhead? Like the fact that you had, like when I've been mixing, I've been thinking about like the width of the overhead. You guys can see here in the actual in the session. This is the only overhead that was supplied. A single overhead. You said it was a specific style of miking, Ryan. I can't remember.
I mean, I don't know. I don't
okay.
know.
Just kind of have but yeah, there was just only a single overhead. So I'm wondering, did it kind of give you a new idea of like, did it kind of like give you a new understanding of like overhead placement and overhead placement in a mix? Because I feel like sometimes when I'm mixing, I constantly I can't decide whether I want the overheads to be super wide or if I want them to be super narrow. And when I listen to the song with 5 tracks in context, it doesn't even like throw me for a loop that there's like a single mono cymbal in the center of the drum tracks. You know what I mean? So did you kind of like, was it a revelation for you at all, or was it just like, I just got a mono drum track, we'll just make it happen?
It was mostly just, I've got a mono drum track, let's make it happen. But there was a moment of me going, well, can I make this stereo using some sort of plugin, like Waves Stereoizer or the VX Shred Spread or whatever it may be. But ultimately, when I did a bunch of time alignment for the close mics to the overheads, they helped out the kit so much that I decided anything stereo-wise is probably going to just mess with the kit.
Gotcha.
Like phase-wise, it's going to kind of mess things up.
Gotcha.
So if I make some pseudo-stereo, it's not actually going to really help.
Gotcha.
It's not realistically going to make it so that this symbol's on the right side and that symbol's on the left side. It's not going to create anything real.
Right.
So at that point, let's leave it in the center and just make sure we have really good control of it. So
Gotcha.
I ended up, EQing out the parts that were aggressive or annoying or angry, so that it is smooth. So even with it being in the center, it's never sitting on the important things like kick, snare, vocal, and any of the other center-based instruments.
Gotcha.
Although you will notice in this session, almost everything provided is mono. The piano is mono in the center. The synth, I do believe, was mono in the center.
Yeah.
The guitars, there are multiple tracks, all those things. But ultimately, everything provided in the session is actually a singular mono instrument. So in this regard, you actually had to just make your panning decisions pretty early on, decide which instruments you wanted to turn into something that took up stereo space,
right,
and which one you just wanted to pan off the center.
Right. So your process, if we talk about this first 2 hours, you said this first 2 hours was like maybe your first 2 hours is more like someone's full day, and maybe the first half hour or 45 minutes is really the 2 hours for someone who's kind of starting out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Kind of getting this stuff down, maybe still getting the hearing frequencies and hearing compression and getting all the stuff down. So your process, but like we said in the beginning, was more or less spending your first kind of prep as this, what we do in, I guess you could say, our kind of process of Mix Wednesday that we've been kind of teaching for a year, which was you didn't really jump outside of this concept of having a corrective EQ. Your drums, so you had your time adjustment after that, which is interesting. Do you always put your time adjuster after your EQ? I thought you did it the other way around, time adjuster first.
Well, I always use a one-band EQ as my first plugin on literally everything. I mean, if you scroll, you'll see it's everywhere.
It's everything. Yeah. So it's really just one band EQ on everything, and you just do option click, right? That's all it is.
Yeah, option, and I drop in a high pass on literally everything.
Yeah, that's cool.
The reason time adjusters on slot 2 is because it's very easy to turn off. In fact, if you want to find a section of the drums where the drums are playing, you can select, cue the drums, maybe select a region where it's just like, a 4 on the floor, or maybe a 4 on the floor with a tom fill. Yeah, somewhere like right there looks good. Cool. You don't need to select that much of it. There you go, just a little bit. And now it makes it very easy, since all the time adjusters are in slot 2, for you to option, command, shift, click them to bypass them, and then re-enable them.
Gotcha.
So if you hit play right now,
actually, let me
and
just...
then you bypass them, and then enable them, and then bypass them, and enable them, it would be very easy for you to A/B whether or not the time adjuster is helping you out.
All right, let's take a listen. Wow, holy shit.
To me, it's a massive difference.
Yeah, that's
huge.
That is huge. Holy crap.
And all that is a time adjuster that's phase aligning your kit.
Well, it makes sense because you're listening to basically mono tracks. So that phase correction is going to be more noticeable in a mono paradigm. I didn't actually think about that when right before we did this. That overhead is so much different because we can actually hear it. It's right in the center. That's incredible.
Right. Yeah, so since this is the mono overhead and we've done time alignment, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is that I had the option to put something that made it stereo.
Right.
Some sort of stereoizer or some sort of delay, whatever you want.
Right.
But the difference we got by time aligning everything to it was so significant that it was no longer valuable to make that overhead stereo, and more valuable to just keep it all like coherent phase-wise.
Right. So essentially, getting your sounds, even your drum sounds, you really just time adjusted and had some high pass filtering. And from there, it was really a matter of looks like you were doing some correction. I saw on your kick drum you were just grabbing the attack of the kick, and you used the actual you used the rest of the body in the sample that you added here. Same kind of thing with the snare, from what I remember. And then you have some creative EQ. Actually, this looks like additional corrective EQ. Nothing even really
it's basically
massive.
more corrective. If I'm not mistaken, the group is where the creative EQ is. So if you go to the kick group, or maybe in this one there isn't a kick group.
Yeah, it might actually just be snares. So you did drums.
Even the snare, that's snare verb and snare plate. There is no creative EQ here at all. It's only corrective.
Yep. And because I don't have this SSL comp, I mean, it's just compression. So you really just kind of chopped up what you wanted. You multiply, you added a sample, and then you got your sound. You did your time adjustment before all of that, and there was your drum sound. And one of the things I've noticed doing more of this is that if you can get your drums sounding good, and you're working on a modern mix, you've got a lot of the mix there. So right then and there, you work on your drums, you've got your process that you go through, your EQ, compression, gate, all that kind of stuff, time adjustment, and you already kind of got a drum sound that's pretty rocking. And that's kind of what you did here. And I'm sure that took you, in the actual session, it didn't even look like it took you that long. It was like, I don't know, I don't remember the exact amount of time it took you to do that, but it wasn't a long amount of time at all. So that's a really cool process. It's a really cool process. would you say that aside from the drums being mono, there were other elements to this mix that were limiting? Because it felt like a pretty straightforward mix after that.
For the
Would you
most
agree,
part, it's
or-
pretty straightforward. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. If I'm not mistaken, there was 2 bass tracks, and I think in the end I might have just muted one of them and not used it.
You're like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I was just focused. If I'm not mistaken, one of them basically just sounded like it doubled the other one.
Oh yeah, where is this
And I think
bass?
realistically, I only used one. It's right underneath the drums, so right after the drums would
Oh,
be.
got it. I got it. Cool.
Yeah, so you see how there's bass dynamic there? If
Yeah.
you expand the left side of the window here, you'll see that there's a hidden track that's bass bass
Yep.
condenser.
Got it.
I was just like, we don't need this. It doesn't help. It doesn't make it any better. Let's get rid of it.
And it's got a wacky response.
love
Holy
it.
crap! Look at that wacky response. That's crazy.
But the truth is, muting stuff out is part of your power as a mix engineer.
Right.
I love muting.
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit last week when we were talking about Chris Hayes' track. Kenny, you were saying we were talking about no. Ryan, you were talking about your mix with that other guy and saying how he muted a bunch of crap and his mix was like way better than your mix. And it's
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Servant.
yes, that one. That's the guy.
Yeah, Servant Grenade just crushed it, but he muted like tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Kenny,
that
you
was
said
necessary.
Kenny, you said you mute a lot of stuff sometimes. Are you muting stuff that you tracked, or are you muting stuff that was not tracked by you?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean,
Boom. Doesn't matter.
it really doesn't. If it's,
I love it.
I mean, granted, if it's something that I tracked, it's usually has to do with the movement of the mix. I'll mute things, but yeah, I fucking love muting.
Yeah.
I'll typically even, rather mute effects than ride them if I can.
Right. That's really cool. But yeah, no, I felt, other than that drum set, and I didn't even notice the actual bass. I must have skipped over the bass part, I think, when we were talking about it. When I was actually watching the video, because I really like. I'll admit it. Like I watched the beginning of it. I watched the drums part. I found that part. I watched the end when you're applying some EQ to the master. But I didn't really, I kind of missed because the rest of it seemed like it was pretty straightforward, and you kind of got it to a place. I wish I had some of those really rad reverb plugins that you have, so we could kind of show that on the stream. Maybe you guys can catch that in the 2-hour mix that Ryan did for this song. We can post that later. But yeah, a lot of the space, a lot of what you did, and all that kind of stuff, kind of felt like you were just maximizing the amount of time by just going through and surgically mixing each track and listening to it. And it's a very smooth process. I don't even know how to explain it any other way. It's just like you have this smoothness about you that translates to your mixing. That I don't know, watching you do it is something that's pretty educational. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's less thinking going on because you're so focused. Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah. Well, let's kind of break it down, right? On any given track, right?
Right.
Be it drums, percussion, bass, guitars, keys, vocal, whatever. There's 4 steps to all. It's cleaning up, correcting, controlling, and creating. Right. So let's call this the 4 C's because that's kind of a cheesy and great way to say it, right? 4 C's of a track. Okay. So the cleanup, it's going to be gating, high pass filters, low pass filters, that kind of stuff. You might even be doing editing if you need to, cutting out things like squeaks on a guitar, extra noise on a bass where the guy just tapped something, whatever. But if you've got compression after it, ultimately it's going to turn into a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to clean up, I don't know, whatever else there may be. That's cleaning up. You got gating, high pass, low pass, just to kind of fit it into where it is, whatever's relevant information.
Right.
Then you've got corrective. So that's where you'll probably EQ out problem frequencies. Now, in order to know what a problem frequency is, you already need to know what your goal sounds like. So this is part of why we use things like references, right? We use references so that we go, I want my vocals to sound like this Celine Dion track. I find it funny. I keep going back to Celine Dion because I haven't listened
Yeah.
to Celine Dion in probably 10 years.
I
But
was just thinking that.
All you got to do is just
This
listen
is
to
kinda
Adele,
funny.
and that's pretty much a modern version of Celine Dion.
you know what? The new Adele record sounds amazing.
It does. That's what I'm saying. Go listen to that.
Yeah.
Songwriting wise, it's just more sad songs, and I kind of liked her happier songs a little better. But
Yeah, the
you know,
attitude,
we're all allowed to be
yeah.
sad.
You know.
But anyways,
Important.
so okay, clean up. You need to have a sound in mind. This is my final version of what I want this to sound like, and you can kind of cut here and there to get rid of the things that you think are problems in the sound,
Mhm.
right? Then you go to controlling. Controlling is usually dynamic related stuff. So you might have, let's say, a high pass, a gate, a corrective EQ, then a compressor. And this compressor is not a creative compressor. It is to actually control, pardon me, to control the level.
Gotcha.
This could either be a compressor or it could be automation. Depends what you want to do. At this point, you could even do things like splitting stuff into frequency bands. For example, bass guitar. Bass guitar, even in this, you'll see I split into highs and lows. And this is a control thing, right? Because the lows I need to control more particularly than I need to control the highs. Because low end in a mix is a pretty important function here. So kick drum and bass tend to be a problem with many mixes, right? Guys
Exactly.
often have problems with both of them fighting with one another. So here I've split up the bass into both of those. That's my control portion. After that, I've got my creative choices. Things like saturation and creative EQ, stuff I might just do because it makes it sound better overall.
Right.
So if you split every instrument down into these four things, cleanup, corrective, control, and creative choices, then you end up with a pretty solid methodology for getting to the end of your mix. And the truth is, 90% of your time is going to be spent up doing cleaning up, correcting, and controlling.
Yep.
Once you get to the end of what I consider, the static mix, that's where you really start to go into the creative choices. You start pushing EQs and doing harmonic stuff that's fun because the mix already sounds like a mix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it has a lot to do with all of these things. Really depend on what we kind of started this whole conversation about, which was, we didn't say it outright, but what is your vision for the mix when you listen to it with these references? So after that, you can say cleanup. Cleanup, you don't really need. Cleanup, I feel like, is one of those things where, yeah, you can listen to a reference, but cleanup is more like, this has got to go. You know what I mean? This is not supposed to be here. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the
But
corrective.
it's almost irrelevant to your reference, right?
Right. Exactly. The corrective, control, and creative, though, those things, those kind of, you check it against your reference, because corrective, every genre has a different version of corrective. Every genre has a different version of controlling, if there is any control. And then every genre has its own version of creative. If you're, that's kind of what it is. So it's all kind of, different. But if you follow those steps and you have a good vision, then your first 2 hours of your mix will actually be quite productive. Kind of like what Ryan Johns was like.
Right.
You know?
I think the next step is okay, cool. You got a vision. You understand the process order.
Yep.
And then the hardest part of mixing is both knowing and going from your source to your vision version of that source. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, you go, I got drum overheads. I want them to sound blah, blah, blah. Okay, but this is what I've got. It's the A to B point process that's actually the hard part. The more you do it, obviously, the faster you get at it. But if you can see your vision and go, these are the aspects of the vision that are most relevant, right?
Yep.
You can say, when it's overheads, it's clarity and spatial detail. Maybe. I mean, I feel like that's most things, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you kind of go for
Yeah.
for overheads? Okay, cool. Then you can go, these are the two things I need to make sure I get. If I can get these two, then we can kind of get away with everything else. So clarity, okay, maybe I need to take out 700 to get rid of that metal sound. Okay, cool. Maybe it's kick drum. I've got impact, tone, and decay, right? Something like that. So if I've got the punch, I've got like the note per se,
Yeah.
and then I've got a decay that like isn't just a hit, but like actually is a hit with some sort of roll off. Then I'm good there.
Right.
Maybe the same for snare. Maybe the same for toms.
Right.
When it comes to bass, there's kind of like these fundamental things you need to decide, right? So again, for overheads, it's clarity and spatial, and spatial positioning or whatever. For kick, it's impact, tone, delay. For bass, it might be foundation and note.
Yeah.
Right. Something like that.
Yeah.
So if you can figure out all the aspects of each individual instrument, and you can create your vision based on those aspects, it becomes easier for you to create a mix and go, okay, I've got the foundation part down. Now I've got the note part down. Let's move on to the next instrument. Okay, now I'm on guitars, and I want to create width and soundscape.
Right.
Fill in space. So if you can figure out the important aspects of each instrument, you can kind of move through your mix quickly because like the foundational elements of each of them you're trying to hit.
You know what you're listening to.
Right.
You have an idea, and that's probably the thing that, as way less experienced, sometimes I will unconsciously or consciously say to myself, what am I listening to? You know what I mean? And it's like, I think I've said it less now, but yeah, you're right. Understanding how these different elements break down and how to listen to them, and like almost like a mental checklist, it's ultimately going to get you to a place where you have what you need, which is confidence in your mix. And once you have more of that, then you can basically say, all right, listen to this, go through, like, listen to it, like we were talking about, in an iTunes playlist next to your favorite bands, and see if it actually matches up. And the more confidence and the more of that stuff you have, and the more you're able to do that, the better that's going to happen, your end goal. So it's a really not a roundabout way. It's a really constructive way of explaining how you should mentally think about your mix in the first 2 hours and all the instruments into it. The Pro Tools session that we have in front of us, it's a great example of that. But every mix should kind of have that, and that's why it's what we're doing in the mix and the EQs and the frequencies and all that stuff. If you have those fundamental tools down, whatever mix you're working on is going to apply those things. The fact that we're working on this specific mix on this specific track is irrelevant. You can apply that to any mix. You know what I mean? And that's really the core thing here in your first 2 hours of mix. That's why it's kind of hard putting together a concept for what's the first 2 hours of a mix, or what is this mix? What's interesting about it? So I think that's a great breakdown. Honestly, we should like publish that somewhere. Those things, like we have impact, we have, it's totally true. Like with impact, tone, and decay, that's a kick drum and a snare to some extent. That's a great way of looking at it.
Let's do a book.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize, by the way, while I was saying that, I was basically reading off of my Mix Wednesday book outline that I'm in the middle of writing.
Hey, man. Whatever
How
floats
about
your
it,
boat.
folks?
Yeah.
We did a book. Would you buy it? Or at least read it?
Hey, I'd buy
Maybe
it.
consider reading it?
I'd buy it.
So we got a couple questions here.
Oh, cool.
Ariel asks, what things tend to vary the most, and what things tend to stay the most similar from session to session? Kenny, do you want to answer that one? That's an interesting question. It's a really good question.
Yeah.
What things tend to vary the most, and what things tend to stay the most
from session to
similar from
session. What changes the most, and what's pretty much the same every time you get it?
That's a tough one, because it's just that really does, everything varies every time. It really depends on the material.
You know what I find tough about that question is that the best answer makes you seem like an asshole.
Yeah, I really don't want to be the guy that's like, it depends on every, for every answer. But let me think. I mean, I tend to do a lot of things similar from mix to mix. I do a lot of the things that we've mentioned in here. Um, and there are things that I learn as time goes on. Like with a kick drum, pulling out some of the 400 range tends to clear things up. Things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
1K in the
so
vocal down.
yeah, yeah.
For me, it's
But
7
again,
to 9. Yeah.
again, always depends on the source material. Uh, I guess there are some things that you tend to do. I mean, like when I'm mixing vocals, like live vocals, I'm pulling a lot of, again, 4 or 500 out and boosting a little bit of like 2.5, 3K, for some presence and things like that.
Right.
I would say the method is always similar, and what changes is just the content. I mean, that's a really vague way of putting it, but method that we explain, that's kind of the way I always think about this stuff. They're more like definitive thing, more like a specific thing. My panning is always guitars if it's double tracked with kick, snare, bass, vocals. Compression on that stuff. Sometimes I overdo it, which I've been. But the corrective compression is kind of a new thing for me. That's ever. For me, the thing that is always different is automation. Like I always try and vary my automation. I try and do little things that are different each time to like improve that, because that's where you start having fun. The things that are different that you do on purpose, like throwing ridiculous delays on guitars and all that kind of stuff. So once you get to the creative stage of this stuff is where I think the kind of off the cuff, do what you want, have fun doing it, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, pull it back. But yeah, I try to keep all the stuff that's different, part of my process. Everything else before that is pretty similar, which could be, it's not depressing, but it's like it's like, yeah, no, it is kind of similar. You know what I mean? But I try and vary things up. I'll route a drum reverb around the drum bus into the master, for the hell of it. You know what I mean? See what does this do? But it's really, they're just creative
Yeah.
choices. They're not really like, they're in the moment creative choices.
Well, funnily enough, I mean, Dan, I totally back up your answer there, is that the sources are always different, the method is always the same.
Right.
What makes
Yeah.
it funny to me is that, some sessions, like this one, I get 5 tracks for drums. I got kick, snare, tom, overhead. The method is still exactly the same. We
Correct.
go, corrective, control, creative, that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll get 3 tracks for just kick. It'll be an in, an out, and a front of kick mic. And ultimately, you still correct them. You gate them. You clean up problem frequencies. Then you turn them into a group, and then you do the control. Then you do the creative aspect of it. So the difference between 1 kick mic and 3 mics is not really that much, because you still use the same methodology for getting to your endpoint.
Right.
Because you clean up, correct, control, and then do creative stuff. And if it's just on 1 track, cool. If it's on multiples and you're summing them down to 1 track, cool. It doesn't really change the way you deal with it. So in terms of the tracks I get, kick drums, sometimes they're just gutty and a little dull. Sometimes they sound like a plastic head with a metal beater, and it's just click only.
Sometimes they sound like Lamb of God's first record, like a tin can.
Right. And sometimes snare drums,
Dun, dun.
ton of ring, ton of reed. Sometimes it's 3, 4 mics, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. The only thing that changes there is that your ability to control it, really. If you don't have as many microphones, you may not be able to gate it as cleanly, because the 1 mic you have might be a bit of a mess. There might be so much hi-hat in it that your gating becomes irrelevant. At which point, you take control of it by adding something like a sample in that is cleanly controlled and cleanly gated. The vocals tend to be kind of all over the map. Sometimes I get them. They come in there EQ'd fantastically. The mic technique is great. Sometimes they're recorded on a cheap Chinese mic and there's tons of 3K, and you notch that out. But again, the methodology is always the same. So even if your tracks are really good on one and really bad on another, you still kind of treat them in the same manner.
Yeah.
And in the end, hopefully you can come out with a similar sounding product.
Cool. You get a second question?
I feel like there's almost nothing that I actually consistently get. I was gonna say, bass is always the same, but it's not, because sometimes I just get a DI track, and sometimes it's like a perfectly put together microphone, like a 421 on like a B15. So even that, even vocals, again, if it's a cheap Chinese mic, it can have resonant frequencies, and if it's like something fantastic with great mic technique and great performance, it could be basically you don't need to EQ it, and it sounds great.
Pretty awesome. Did Ariel have
and
sorry,
Kenny, go ahead.
my bad.
oh no, I was just gonna say with everything you do, you learn kind of what things tend to work and what don't. So it gives you starting points for other things.
Right.
Yep.
Actually, no. For a moment, I'm gonna back up there. The one thing that is consistent: synthesizers.
Oh yeah.
Synths always sound dope. Period. You almost never need to do anything to them process-wise.
Because they're all like crazy gearheads. They all like
They're all like pre-processed. They're already stereo. They're already bright. They're already all these things.
that's true. If anything, they're
So
too
you
bright.
don't really need to do it. That's the only thing that's consistent on any session I work for. Synths and like SPD sounds. That's it. They're great.
Good on
Everything
you,
else?
synth players.
Right.
Good on you. You make our lives better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's basically the whole idea is that they have a produced sound. It's already a produced sound. So it should already be either where it should be or really, really close.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hope that answered that.
Yeah.
I think it did, honestly.
And so
Did he have
Anything else we
another
want to add
question
to this?
for him? Yeah, can't remember.
what was that, Dan?
Did he have a second question? I feel like there was either you said that he had a couple questions or
That might have been.
Cool.
So
very cool.
I think that kind of covers the majority of what we're going to go through today.
Cool. So to wrap it up, essentially,
Dan, reset your audio, and while you reset your audio, Kenny, how's your day?
My day's pretty good.
Only pretty good.
No, it's good.
Andy's back.
Been a long day, but I love my Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
Good.
I switched it up tonight and got Guinness. It's a nice cold night in New York City. I felt like Guinness was the right choice. Definitely was.
Guinness is
That's
a
fair.
great choice. Often.
Fantastic
I'm
choice.
still going through the Overton Swift abstract.
Nice.
It's a pretty good one. Nah, it's not actually that fancy. It's like a $19 bottle. It's actually pretty cheap.
Still fancy because you're drinking it.
Yeah, but the thing is, you get to you have one right now. This thing has lasted me 2 Mixed Wednesdays so far.
Damn.
So
So,
there's that.
gotcha. Cool. Well, to wrap it up, essentially, your process is something that you think of. You can use our process if you have a process that we'd love to hear about it. Talk to us, chat with us on Facebook, instant message us. We're always online chatting. But we hope that this process, this
We want to learn too. Damn
yeah,
it.
this cleanup, corrective, control, and kind of creative process, your mix vision really helps you kind of improve your productivity in those first 2 hours of your mix. Because essentially, if you're not getting somewhere in the first 2 hours of your mix, probably just start over. Because it's one of those things where it's like, just check yourself,
Digging a
throw
hole.
the faders down, start over. You'll get more done if you just start over. No, I'm kidding.
Check yourself
Slightly.
before you wreck yourself.
Yeah. Anyways, we want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. Like I said last week, we're trying to keep these a little bit shorter, but hey, sometimes it goes over. And we love hearing your questions. We love hearing about what you guys are doing. So again, check us out. It's just mixwednesday.com. That'll take you directly to our Facebook group. If you want, click the little subscribe button up at the top of this page for Mix Wednesday. You'll get emails about new videos that we post, and you'll get an announcement or some sort of email when we have one of these streams go live. We're also on Twitter. We post there as well. Not as many followers on there, so if you want to follow us in there too, I guess. So yeah. But in the end, keep mixing. We'll see you guys next week, and have a happy New Year. My name's Dan Gonzalez.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Kenny.
He sounded so sad.
And I'm Kenny. And we'll see you guys next week.
Kenny, I smoke a lot.
We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
These guys.
Later.